Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining today's webinar. It's called Bringing Courses Online Fast in Response to COVID-19. My name is Julia Michaels. I'm the Executive Director for Powered by Publix. This webinar was organized by APLU's Powered by Publix initiative as the first of what we hope will be several cross-cutting webinars on common themes that you identified, which we will deliver throughout the year. Although Powered by Publix is on hold until mid-May, we wanted to create this virtual space to talk about an issue that is urgent for many of you, and that is how to rapidly bring your courses online at scale and deliver to a student population that in many cases has left campus and returned to their homes with varying levels of capacity to participate in online education. So I know many of you are at institutions that were until recently on spring break, and you've been trying to quickly set all of this up. You're now getting ready to go live with all your courses delivered virtually. So we're hopeful that this webinar is timely and that our panelists today can share some strategies that will be helpful to you as you make this transition. A couple of quick housekeeping items. Since there's a large number of people on the webinar, everyone is automatically muted. We'll be using the interactive Q&A feature for you to submit your questions, or also upvote others' questions. If you see questions you like, please upvote them. Please feel free to submit your questions at any time, as I'll be monitoring this space and feeding questions to the panelists. We'll have ample time for your questions at the end. We'll also share the slides following the webinar, as well as an FAQ document with resources and the recording to today's webinar. So with that, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Karen Vignare, who is Executive Director of the Personalized Learning Consortium at APLU, who will kick us off.
Thanks, Julia. We are really grateful for our speakers because obviously they're in the midst of also doing all the work that Julia just discussed about moving the courses online, and they're supporting that at a state level. I'm pleased to be part of APLU. The Personalized Learning Consortium really works with our members around the effective use of technologies, which unfortunately is very timely right now. Most of our work has been around adaptive learning, but it's also been around advising. We are currently also working with Every Learner Everywhere. That is a network that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has set up to focus on improving digital learning. That group will also be pulling together some credible resources to share, and we'll let you know when those are available as well. So it's my pleasure to introduce two of my colleagues. These are wonderful colleagues, wonderful friends, and I've gotten to know them well over the years. Dr. Jim Ptaszynski is Vice President for Digital Learning at the University of North Carolina System Office. Jim became the Vice President in 2018. His primary responsibilities include implementing Digital Learning Action Plan and leading the UNC System Advisory Council on Online Education and Digital Learning. He will be conducting research into the needs for online and has responded very quickly to support the universities and colleges in North Carolina going online and serving their students in this emergency situation. Dr. Hei Okimoto, Ph.D., also currently holds, because she can, we don't wish this on everybody, holds two positions at the University of Hawaii in the system offices. She's first the Director of Academic Technologies, and then second, Associate Vice President of Student Affairs. Hei has had responsibility for more than 30 years in developing and delivering a customer-focused suite of services, the learning management system, the student information system, and distance learning. So it is, without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and hand this over to Jim, who will tell us a little bit about what he's doing at North Carolina.
Great,
Jim.
Thank you so much, Karen. I'm going to turn my video off so I can save some bandwidth where I am, and hopefully we'll still be able to do what we need to do. So I'm going to request control, and there we go. Okay, so again, thank you, Karen. I appreciate being here today. So I want to kind of start off with saying that you know, I really like the directorial style of Quentin Tarantino. You may remember him directing Pulp Fiction, Reservoir Dogs, Desperado. The films are usually over the top, but I like the directorial style. His first scene is usually taken from the last scene in the movie. It's usually very disconcerting and difficult to understand how the movie got to that point, but then it goes back to the beginning of the story, which is actually now the middle, and it weaves through the plot and subplots and ends where it started, but this time it all makes sense. So keeping that in mind, I want to start with the end of what we produced and kind of weave through and show you how we got there. Now, the result of our efforts over the last several weeks, and it's been about 3 weeks, was a 35-page, actually a 13-page, as I will explain in a moment, resource for faculty needing to quickly move online. The document, Moving to Alternative Instructional Formats, can be found at this website, dli.northcarolina.edu. And on that site, there is a PDF version that is more mobile friendly, as well as a copy in its native Word format. So feel free to download the Word doc, make changes to it in case you wish to adapt all or part of it for your campus. We regularly update that, so you'll see version numbers on it, and then there are release notes at the back of the document showing what's changed. So you should check up there quite often to see if we added some new material. We're trying to work throughout our system and beyond to get as much advice to put in there as possible. Now, in addition to this resource document, what I would describe as providing emergency academic continuity, we also developed a partnership with LinkedIn, which I'll describe in greater detail in a moment. So let me now describe what we faced at the UNC system. This spring semester, we have over 14,000 faculty teaching over 50,000 courses. And that does not include the online courses. This is all face-to-face courses. We were faced with having to move all these courses to alternative formats in a matter of 2 to 3 weeks. And it really depended upon when the individual institutions had their spring break. Now, we did not have and still do not have an accurate number of how many faculty among the 14,000 who did not have any experience teaching online, but with such a large denominator, even a small percentage added up to a very large number of faculty needing help during a short period of time. We also had a great deal, and still have, a great deal of variability in the capabilities of each of our universities that had to respond to this situation. Let me move my next, there we go, okay. So the University of North Carolina system is made up of 16 universities. These universities range from baccalaureate granting institutions through comprehensive universities, all the way to 1 R2 and 2 R1 universities. NC State University and the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. One of our universities has a very sophisticated support division with over 100 people. At the other end, there is an institution with less than a half a dozen. And also, there's a wide range of types of universities. We have 5 HBCU universities, as well as 1 Native American university. Now, to compound this situation, the universities are spread across the state. The distance between the most western and the most eastern universities is almost 1,000 miles. Now, one of the things that we did at the very first thing we did was to reach out to collaborate with the leaders of our faculty development centers, faculty assembly, and our faculty fellows. Each of our universities has their own faculty senate, and then from each university, representatives are chosen to be a part of a university-wide body called the Faculty Assembly. We also reach out to a group of faculty that serve as advisors to my office throughout the year called Faculty Fellows. Now, you probably see a trend here. From the very beginning of our academic continuity initiative, we wanted to make sure that faculty had a voice in what was being developed. We knew that without having them play an integral role, it was likely we would miss the target we were aiming for. We first solicited what should be our perspective, our North Star, given the short timeline and the huge number of faculty that needed assistance. So we decided to strike the right balance between providing essentials to avoid overwhelming those new to online teaching, while providing enough detail to help them ramp up to online teaching quickly and efficiently. Now, we did a scan, as I'm sure many of you have done, and you've seen them referenced in Inside Higher Ed or in the Chronicle of Higher Education, that the scores of sites now developed across the country to meet the need of quickly moving instruction online. Now, there are lots of outstanding sites, but we felt that none of them fully closed the gap we were looking to fill. Again, essential but detailed. Now, many of them were too high level, talking about the need to establish, for example, an online presence, or too low level, simply providing the steps for signing on to Zoom, or too broad, how to apply universal learning design to online learning. So again, there were lots of outstanding sites, but we wanted something that was really focused on being really essential but detailed. So we came up with a 35-page resource guide, which actually is only a baker's dozen, about 13 pages, and the rest are appendices. We wanted something around a dozen pages that would not overwhelm faculty who had just heard their professional life had been turned upside down. At the same time, we did not want them to have to go through all these different sites and leave it up to them, the faculty, to create the bridge between teaching practices and recommended technology. So what we did was we started by making it very clear what this document was and was not. Now, we made sure they understood that this was not intended for instructors wishing to convert their entire course to fully online. Rather, it was to support the use of technology to continue face-to-face classes during times when students and faculty cannot physically meet because of the coronavirus. We have quite a few hurricanes in the fall on our coast, etc. Now, to be clear, we emphasize emergency teaching online is not the same as teaching online. Now, again, there are lots of sites that gave information on the virus. Wash your hands. And we intentionally stayed away from those kinds of pronouncement in our resource. Instead, we started by giving faculty essential advice on how best to make the emergency switch to online. Little things like printing out or saving to a local hard drive their syllabus, class assignments, as well as their class roster. This was all in case the campus networks became overloaded or shut down. We also gave them some general guidelines to prepare their students to move online. We had previously developed an online 101 course for students, which we dusted off and reintroduced to faculty and students. And then we did some, so where do I begin? And that was specific guidance for faculty starting to take their courses online. Now, but the core of our resource is really two tables. The first table is a list of classroom practices that most faculty wish to do when they move online. Given that there are so many different technology used across our 16 universities, this table provided guidance regardless of what technology a faculty member used. In contrast, the second table listed these same classroom practices, but this time provided multiple technologies that might be used to address the classroom problem of practice. Again, given the plethora of technologies that could be leveraged and our desire not to overwhelm the faculty members, we did some triage and limited the number of technologies covered. For example, for video conferencing technologies, we covered Zoom, Microsoft Teams, Google Hangouts, and Canvas conferences, since they seem to be the most prevalent across our system. We then provided deep hyperlinks to our own internal training resources or to service provider training and support sites. The extensive use of hyperlinks ensured that the document was not too long and intimidating, but at the same time, it could provide an in-depth resource when the faculty member wanted to take advantage of them. Now, this is where our partnership with LinkedIn started. We quickly realized that we had gaps in the training materials we needed to bring faculty that were new to online quickly up to speed. And we did not have the time or the resources to create all that we needed to close these gaps. So we started examining LinkedIn Learning and found many of the courses we needed, such as Blackboard Essentials, Canvas 101, Microsoft Teams for Education, and working remotely. But the problem we faced was that not all our universities had a subscription to LinkedIn Learning. So we reached out to LinkedIn Learning, and the result was using the aforementioned groups across the university, especially the faculty groups, we identified those LinkedIn learning courses that would help us and potentially other universities fill their gaps in faculty support. LinkedIn Learning agreed to curate these courses and put them on a location on their site that any university could access them without a subscription. Now, here is a list on LinkedIn Learning describing these courses. I know the URL that I previously showed is quite long, so if you download Moving to Alternative Instructional Formats document, you'll find in Appendix K a link to this article as well as hyperlinks to all these courses. Now, as a wrap-up, whoops, went one too far. As a wrap-up, I just show one more slide of resources in our guide. While we did not want to duplicate existing university sites, especially around the coronavirus, we did feel it would be helpful to put faculty at their fingertips some commonly needed information, such as what do their campus infrastructure look like? Some of them did not know what technology tools were available on their campus, so we provided a chart of that after surveying their CIOs. And that would also align to the recommendations given in Table 2. We put in how to contact the Faculty Development Center. I'm worried about things like proctoring online. Who do I speak with? So we added the list of proctoring contacts. And then if I have an IT issue, who do I talk with now that I'm off campus? And then finally, how do I sign up for campus alerts? So in closing, I would say minimize, minimize, minimize. These folks are trying to get online as quickly as possible, and we have to figure out what's the most essential things that we can provide for them. It would be almost like if you were out on a sailboat with some friends and the boat started taking on water, and you had a couple of people with life jackets on, but they didn't know how to swim. Well, you're not going to teach them the breaststroke or the side stroke, or especially the butterfly. You're going to probably teach them the doggy paddle. So we really focused on that. What will get our folks through the next couple weeks? And then we start thinking about how we can get them through the end of the semester, start fall, spring, summer session, and then fall session. But minimize, minimize, minimize. Karen, that's all I have to say.
There we go. Sorry, I had to unmute. Thank you, Jim. That was wonderful. I think we've already taken in a lot of information, and many people are still asking about the website. We will repost that, but it was dli.northcarolina.edu.
Right.
I'd like to turn it over to Hay, who is also doing this groundbreaking and quick pace work at Hawaii, which may have 1,000 miles, but is in lots of different islands. So, hey, please join us. Pleased to have you join us today, and we'll let you start talking.
Thank you. And unlike Jim, I do not have slide deck ready to go. However, I thought I would talk a bit. And as Karen said when she started the introductions, I'm actually holding two roles, student affairs, as well as the whole distance learning instructional technology. So, you know, us in student affairs, we like to talk story and make everybody feel comfortable. But anyway, on that note, one of the things that I think when we started this, we literally had about a week when the university started having our conversation about what are we going to do. And this was the week before spring break. And we said, we have to make a decision before students leave for spring break and before faculty leave for spring break, as this is our only time that we have to get ready. And so part of this was, how do we get ready? First part, I think before creating the website, we talked a lot in our group about what does getting ready mean. And I think much as what Jim said, it was, we can't be giving our faculty how to be a good distance learning faculty. They don't have to go to websites about learning about best practices for distance learning. It really is, how do we doggy paddle in the online environment? And when we first started this conversation, we thought we would only be going online for maybe a month. But then since we started, we have now decided that we were going to complete our entire semester online. So we had, so our faculty population is a little over, close to 7,000, of which 20% had experience either teaching online or using the various online tools. So that meant that we had about 80% of faculty who basically used email. And so how do we move forward in that direction? So our teaching, remote teaching during an emergency became the website. And Julie, if you just, or maybe I should, or let's see, Julia, maybe if you just kind of scroll up through the site. So part of it was
control, by the way.
Oh, okay, perfect. Do I have to do anything? I'm not being able to move. Oh, there we go. So one of the things that we first started, so part one was about communication. How do we communicate among our faculty, among our instructional designers spread across the 5 islands, as well as with our students? Part of it was then creating a website where we drove all information to, and then, oops, I can't. And much like how Jim has his site structured, the first thing we actually asked faculty to do was to download this checklist for them, looking at the kinds of things that they would do in the classroom. And for each of the activities, we had some tutorial links, as well as we literally did mini lessons each day so faculty could come into a Zoom location. The other thing that we actually, because we only have 10 institutions across our islands, we decided upfront for the to best serve our students and faculty, we're only going to use one tool. And so our learning management system is Sakai. So everybody was driven to our Sakai instance, which we call Lalima. And then we chose Zoom as the way that all instruction would occur, only because we were concerned for our students that if they had to use Google Meets in one scenario and Zoom in another, or some other video conferencing platform, that it would actually hinder their learning, having to switch and learn different technologies, even though the technologies are not that complicated to learn. So literally every day we started with, we had lessons. The first day we talked about getting your syllabus online, and we created templates for our community colleges as well as our four-year institutions so that they could literally plug in their information. It would be, we would in fact tell them how to plug it in so that it would try to be ADA compliant. So each day was something else about how would we put in your syllabus, how do you send email, how are the different ways of sending email, how would you deliver lectures, etc. You'll notice that we actually have the Google Meet as well as Zoom, partly because we were concerned about our technology infrastructure in terms of how students would get to us. We were a little worried that with the whole world getting on Zoom, that we might need a different backup plan. And so Google Meet was our backup plan. So this is how it was actually structured. In addition, then we literally, here's our mini lessons that we would provide. So I can share this website with anybody who would like to use that as a reference. At the end, then, as faculty members gave us suggestions, we kept putting up additional information, tips and resources that were curated so that faculty weren't having to go through everything themselves and trying to figure out what was good. The thing that we were trying to impress upon our faculty was, this is extraordinary times. You're not going to become an expert online teacher in 1 week or 2 weeks. Our focus was, how can we get our students through to the finish line? Because especially for our graduating students, they couldn't delay graduation because they had grad schools, they had other lives ready to be going. And we also said, you can't recreate your traditional classroom in an online environment in 1 to 2 weeks. So what are the most important things? Prioritize what students need to do for over the next several weeks before they graduate. Prioritize what you need to do in terms of getting them there. And importantly, stay connected. So let me chat a little bit about our stay connected. the way that we felt that we connect to our faculty the best was we are a heavily unionized state, and so we have a strong faculty senate presence on all our campuses. We worked with our faculty union, including leadership from across our campuses, and every day we have a meeting at 12 o'clock so the faculty can tell us as instructional design staff what kinds of problems faculty were facing, and we would then push out the lessons and meet their needs. In addition, then every day at 4 o'clock, I would meet with all the student affairs, vice chancellors for student affairs, deans of students across our 10 campuses to get a sense of where our students were. And so, Julie, if we can go to the learning during an emergency. So just as much as we put together our teaching during an emergency, we put together a learning during an emergency website for our students. And this is where I think our community of faculty and instructional designers and student support professionals across the US has been phenomenal, because we actually borrowed and retooled ideas that we received from our colleagues. And so for our students, then we put together the kinds of things that we felt they would need in terms of being successful. So each day as we were teaching faculty how to do things, we would actually have faculty say, if we were talking about communication, here's the messages, some of the messages that you might push out to your students so that they know that you are connecting with them, and that you're helping them prepare also. While it's on the other side, we would be pushing out messages to all our students saying, today you should have received communication from your faculty that this is how you're going to be meeting, whether it's synchronously or asynchronously. And so this was communication, I think, in any scenario was key. In addition, I think that the other 2 points that I would make is figuring out who was going to do the communication, because we didn't want students to be getting mixed messages. We didn't want faculty to be getting mixed messages. So by having these points that we funneled communication through, we could triage, we could solve problems in the background, but one person would be the one that was sending out information, both up the chain, across the chain, and down the chain. Today, we started back to school, so I haven't seen my computer light up with too many issues, so hopefully we prepared at least for our first week of school. The other thing that we spent a lot of time was in terms of equity and access, because many of our students, in most of our campuses, we have more than 60% of our students who are Pell eligible. And so many of those students do not have access to technology or internet connections at home. So our IT folks at our state actually rallied. And so for any faculty or student who did not have internet connection at home, our 2 internet providers are providing 60 days of free internet. It might need to be longer, so we might have to renegotiate this. In addition, then, where there were laptops and equipment to be checked out, we move forward in that direction. Now, while we are closed in terms of face-to-face classes, our campus is still open. And so while we're not open to the public, we are open to our students and staff. Though it could change, because as of 4:30 today, our mayor has said on the various counties, all employees who can work from home should work from home. But one of the things that we are doing is keeping our campuses open for our students who do not have or cannot have access to technology. So our computer labs are open, our libraries are open, so that students can have a place where they can connect. Of course, each of the places are practicing social distancing, because many of our classrooms are not in session, are being used, then some of our janitorial staff are being moved to clean at the libraries or places where, in fact, students may have to congregate. So I think at the end of the day, much of our work is trying to meet the needs of our students where they are, help our students finish. these are extraordinary times, and we're not going to do the best we can, or we are going to do the best we can. It's not going to be perfect. We're going to learn from this process. But the 2 points that I guess at the end of the day, we want to make sure that our students finish, and we want to make sure that our employees stay safe. And that happens, I think. The key in all of this is communicating, and key in all of this is providing space for faculty and students to get help as they need help. That's it.
Thank you, Hay. That was incredibly wonderful. And I'd actually love for Jim to respond, because that is one of the biggest questions that we had was, what are you doing about those students? And quite honestly, as both of you have started to explain how diverse and the places are that you're serving, when we think about faculty connections. And it sounds like Hawaii is in a little bit different state of emergency than many of us. So keep that in mind. How are you guys handling the equity issue, Jim?
So we have put it in our guidance for faculty members to have that front and center. But we realize that everything is more difficult now. And we have a number of our institutions that have reached out to us and said, hey, you know, some of our students don't have their own personal computers. And they use the computers in the lab. So we're looking at various alternatives for that. We've reached out, for example, to our state surplus agencies, where you can buy, you know, in state surplus, a laptop for $20. But most of them do not have hard drives because of security. They got to be taken out and shredded. So we're trying to triage and look at the most pressing issues and try to work on those.
Yeah, and I think that is the word that we're hearing from most others, and that is triage. And the way we look at this problem, and we're actually seeing in some cases where businesses are helping with the internet connections, and we're trying to figure out locally what can happen when our students are sent home. Hey, I don't know if you also want to respond to how you're helping faculty, because not all your faculty have access as well.
Exactly. So some of the things that we said to our faculty is, if you need a place where you need to teach from, then we have some computer labs dedicated, or computer equipment dedicated to faculty, so they can come and videotape things. We actually have also used some of we have a system, our Hawaii Interactive Television System, which is more of a two-way video conferencing system. So we've actually made those rooms available for faculty to come in and videotape. For example, you know, in some cases, faculty were teaching upper level math, where there's lots of math problems and equations that get written on boards. So part of this was videotaping some of that and putting them online. We're actually using any resources that we have available, because you're right. As we started going down this route, faculty said, I don't have a computer with a video a camera or a microphone even. How will I be teaching? You know, how can I do this? Also, it's kind of similar to Jim, our community has been very supportive. So we've started putting together an emergency fund for our students, so that they could apply for funding to purchase computers or laptops or whatever educational resources they might need, or an emergency fund to help them pay the rent or get from place to place, partly because we are such a economy based on tourism, and with the pandemic as it is, our hotels are pretty empty. Our restaurants are across our state are not doing dine-in service. Everything's moving to takeout, so people are losing their jobs. So we need a way for students to be able to apply for emergency funds so they can tie them through the system, you know. And one of the other things that we don't talk about, but that I feel we should, is our student employees. many of our student employees need those jobs to help ends meet. And so we've made a commitment that if possible, we're going to figure out how to have our student employees work from home. But in cases where they aren't, then we're trying to keep our campus open so that our student employees can continue to work. And many of our students are now helping faculty with some of the course teaching because they are familiar with the tools. And in some cases with our graduate students, where we might, as we're looking at different ways of doing instruction, that they can be the readers of the essays instead of the multiple choice exams. And because we do want to keep our students engaged and employed.
Yeah, that's a wonderful trying to think about how to keep those students engaged and use them in a virtual workforce. I'm going to shift a little bit. We had both questions in the registration, and we're getting questions in the chat. And I want to thank my colleague Julia for getting those to me. Clearly, people are worried about what to do about assessments and final grades. We're hearing a lot that some institutions are leaving that completely up to faculty. Some institutions are recommending a pass-fail. Some are recommending credit, no credit. If you could just share any of the advice and the policies that you guys are also looking at in your two states. Jim, you want to go first?
We're doing all of the above. You know, with the 16 universities, we have a central board that sets tuition and other major policies, but it's left up to the institutions and the faculty senates to decide upon the issues you're talking about. So UNC Chapel Hill, for example, has decided to go to pass-fail. Other universities are deciding whether or not to do that or do other things. So I think we run the gamut on that.
And for the University of Hawaii system, that is also our kind of what we're grappling with right at this moment. It's not as simple as it seems for us, partly because we have so many academic policies in place that, you know, we say in certain courses in your gen eds, you cannot take the course pass-fail. In other areas, we say you can only have so many credits of pass-fail before you graduate. So how do we keep consistent to our policies? What policies can we suspend for the interim to be able to do this? Of course, our banner student information system is all tied to our policy, so it's not as easy as wave my magic wand and say, this semester we're doing pass-fail, because then we have to rewrite all these rules and then write them back again after the fact. The other thing, and actually this was on a webinar that I listened to last week, which I thought was quite interesting, was to say to our faculty, what grades are, because you know, we're right now at 60% of our semester. So we only have 40% more to go, to say, what grades were your students getting before they went on spring break? And then let's see how they do in this new online environment. And is there a way to somehow leverage the pre and post kinds of scenarios? Because this is, you know, as faculty, I might not teach as well in the online world. And so am I going to jeopardize my students' grades because of my inability? On the flip side, we can say the students probably signed up for the face-to-face course because they aren't doing it, they're not as comfortable in the online world. Then we have actually another component that we have to address for our students was, because our public schools and private schools across our state have now gone online, they're having to deal with working from home, studying from home, and taking care of their children at home. So how can they balance all of these life situations and be a successful students? So is there some way that we can rethink how we do final exams? How do we do assessments? And so that's where I thought it was intriguing when the webinar said, how are they doing up to this point? And then is there some way that we could weight that current progress to how they do in the next 4 weeks? Of course, then I think of those students who said, okay, I'm going to do better in the last 4 weeks and get the better grade. Anyway, so we are, but we are, while we're having to deal with this, again, as I said at the beginning, what would help our students while being retaining our academic integrity while we move forward with our semester.
Yeah, no, I think that's very interesting, and I've had the same advice I've heard is think about the trajectory of your students and how they were doing before, as they may have to also transition into a climate of learning in an emergency. I love that terminology. We all have to do the best we can, but we have to think about them. And I'd like to go back and say, next to our equity question, we really have to think about those students at risk. If they were learning before and now they've got a set of circumstances, we should really think about what kinds of assessments we could give them in this climate that are going to help us and help them continue to get their degree. So I think that's important. While we're on assessments, one of our big questions is labs and clinical courses, studio courses. Got any advice that you're handing out for those types of courses? We let Jim start before, why don't we let Hay start, and then Jim, you can respond.
So as I said, the University of Hawaii is made up of 10 campuses, 7 of which are community colleges, many of which have a strong career technical training. So as I also said, our campus is not closed. And so we spent last week going through and having a process where faculty could then ask to have their class meet face-to-face. In our automotive mechanics class, you can't really send home engine block for them to work at home. So we had a process where faculty asked to have their course meet face-to-face. They also had to say how they were going to practice good social distancing. And so in some cases, for example, we've said this course is going to meet in person, and we're going to split up the course into groups so that half the course comes at one time, clean the facilities, and the other half comes at the other time. In some cases, the courses are meeting. A good example is our beekeeping course. They're out in the bee fields, taking care of their beehives. So while much of the classroom learning is being done online, we are allowing students to come to our campuses for components of that.
Thanks, Hay. Jim?
So while we're not officially closed, we've just moved to online, we have made it clear that students and faculty have to leave campus. So we do have the problem with labs. There are a couple things that we suggest in the document that I referenced earlier, moving to alternative formats. One is that we've started to compile a list of places where there are virtual labs that faculty members may take advantage of, virtual studios in terms of music and art, for example, and we're trying to gather more of those. The other thing is there's been discussion amongst faculty members where, okay, so they can't go into a lab and collect data, so that step is missing, but then the next phase is taking that data and analyzing it. Can you give them data sets to at least do that? So those are some of the things that we're working on right now.
And now we have a question coming up about security. So, and I'm going to start with Jim because I know Jim's background. And the question is really, some institutions, they're getting tech advice that says certain things may be less secure than others. It seems like it's kind of hard to keep up with security issues, particularly in a time that the climate is changing rapidly. But do you have any advice, or are you guys less concerned with some of those security issues? I think that the person actually was even saying Zoom was one of the things, and since we're on here, I'll just double check that. But I'm just
yeah,
yeah,
they did mention that.
Yeah. So any security advice?
Well, each university normally has a chief security officer within their office of the CIO. And so we ran our document by that person for their advice and counsel. And so I think it is really important to have a discussion with that person. I think one of the problems you have is that with so many of us now having to move toward consumer grade products, so there's a free version of Zoom and then a pro version, et cetera, you lose a lot of the capabilities when they're institutionally controlled. Like most of us at state universities have to have archiving and discovery in case we ever get sued. Well, you may or may not have that if you've gone with the consumer versions. So it's important to talk with your security people. Now, I will say with Zoom in particular, we've investigated that a bit. Sure, there are consumer versions. There are pro versions that you can get institutional licenses for. And then it's my understanding that it requires a separate license, but there are FERPA and HIPAA compliant, because our mental health folks are looking at how do we continue to have that relationship with students, especially after they're leaving campus. And so we're looking at HIPAA compliant versions of Zoom. And I know that Microsoft Teams and their video conferencing, since they are used by large corporations, they have that security built in, some of which you may need to integrate into your systems. But clearly, this is something that, some people are cutting corners, but you do have to take a look at that. And I would leave it up to the security professionals to do that.
Thanks for that. Hey, I'm going to actually ask you to respond to this, but also, and Jim, I'll give you a chance to. But let's shift, not only since you brought up HIPAA, let's also shift into accessibility. I mean, because obviously this is a huge issue that universities pay a lot of attention to in quote unquote normal times. How are we handling accessibility? So you can kind of go back and forth between security and accessibility, and then I'll let Jim have another shot at accessibility as well.
Well, that's a toughie. And, I guess we're being recorded, so no, I need to be careful of what I say. For all of our trainings that we do and all the documentation that we provide for faculty, we say, if you follow these guidelines, then you are going to hopefully meet the ADA compliance requirements. Now, we can say that, but whether faculty actually follow through with that, or do they just take their old PDF and just pop it up? We can't, we're not the police. On the flip side, as we're talking through our training, we're saying, whether you were in a traditional classroom or whether you're in an online classroom, hopefully faculty understand the accessibility needs of their students. So as part of the communication, we tell our students, if you have accessibility needs, make sure your faculty know this so that in fact they can also do things the correct way so that you have access to this. Unfortunately, Zoom, YouTube, all of those products, while they have closed captioning capabilities, it's not 100%, and faculty have to go through another step to put that up available for their students to look at later on. But we're telling our faculty, you have to do this, especially in cases where you know that students need the accommodations. It's good practice. We're not going to police your sites to make sure you do so, but here's all the information that you need, and we can handhold you through the process if you need to. And just as much as Jim said about security, we have conversations with our security officers. We make sure things are available. We've had to upgrade our VPN system so that when staff work from home, they are also accessing our data securely and our information system securely.
Jim, did you want to add anything on accessibility?
Well, yeah, real quick. That is a critical issue. We have put some guidance in our document on that and given some resources to faculty members, some sites, some tools that they should consider. At the end of the day, obviously the faculty are the ones that have to integrate this, so the burden is on them, unfortunately. But also I would say that we are somewhat fortunate in that more and more the commercial providers have taken up the gauntlet to make their products more accessible. They're not perfect yet, but they're much, much better than they were, say, 5 years ago. So where we can, we lean upon those commercial products to bring that into the classroom and online classroom environment.
Oh, thanks for that. I think one of the things that we're also hearing is still a lot of concern about students, not just access, but whether or not the faculty are reaching out to them, and what's the advice to give to a student who says, I haven't heard from my faculty. How do they triage that situation? Jim, we'll probably start with you, and then
help me, Karen. Who triages? Who's the who in the triage?
Oh, in terms of the what does a student do next if they haven't heard from the faculty in this online remote situation?
Right. Well, one of the things that we're encouraging faculty is to over communicate to their students and make sure that they have different ways of communicating. Cell phones, although a lot of people don't like giving out those, we've heard from a number of faculty that very few students have abused that. Adding Slack or chat or other types of things in there to over communicate. But I think what we're finding is that our institutional leaders, the chancellors, the provosts, are doing a very good job in communicating to students, faculty, and staff. And so I would think that if the faculty member is not communicating, that they have yet another avenue when those broad announcements go out and there are links for services and help, that they can go to those support sites and places to initiate that dialogue. But with, as I said, 14,270 faculty teaching across 50,000 courses, I'm sure that there are going to be problems out there.
I would agree with Jim. And the one other thing that we've have available to us that we've connected is our help desk. Help desk is open 24/7, 365 days a year. And the help desk number is a number that we make sure our students have, so that if they haven't heard from their faculty, help desk could look up who they are, who their faculty are, and provide them at least an email connection to our students.
Yeah, I think those are really great advice. We're still getting a little bit more push on the assessment question, and particularly if you have any advice on what are the strategy around final exams, right? So obviously many of those are usually planned on campus at a very particular time. We really don't know how long, but many of us are actually moving to being the full semester online, and maybe even into the summer. So what are you hearing how institutions are responding to final exams?
Karen, I'm trying to live 1 week at a time. Finals is 5 weeks away from us right now. And I'm totally open to hearing other people's suggestions and recommendations you have. I'm just going to jump in, and we are having those conversations every day with our faculty senates, faculty unions, to say what makes sense. And if it's a product that we have to purchase, maybe that's the direction we have to go. If it's different ways of thinking about the assessments that you do, maybe that's what we have to provide support for our faculty to do that. Part of it is really and one solution is not going to fit all of our faculty. So we're actually asking our faculty, what would make sense for you and how can we get there? So in the weeks ahead, I think we are still committed to doing all these little mini lessons that we'll push out to our faculty about how to even think about the final exam for this semester.
Thanks for that. Hey, how about North Carolina, Jim?
Well, I wish we had a silver bullet to give you. We don't. I think that's something that we're really wrestling with right now. A lot of institutions in the past 2 weeks have reached out to me and asked about online proctoring solutions. We have proctoring, high-level proctoring that's done for UNC Online, but it's up to the individual campuses if they incorporate into their any face-to-face classes. Obviously, this has caused them to think about it, about adding that, and the proctoring vendors seem to be overwhelmed at this point, as you might imagine. And most of that face-to-face, someone watching a screen proctoring has kind of gone out the window, and they're now reverting back to the artificial intelligence solutions, which is better than nothing, but not nearly as good as the face-to-face. So we're struggling with that, as I think everyone else is. We're looking at project-based assessments, making it more customized to the students, more open book, but we don't have a thing that we're doing right now, unfortunately. We'll report back if we find something.
We're going to hold you to that, Jim, about reporting back, because I think there's going to be so much we all need to share with each other about what worked and what didn't work in this period. And I think one of the things that we've heard both of you talk about is those students are low income, students of color, first generation students, making sure they stay in the classroom, because I mean, we just know this from research. Hey, and I go way back to the PAR days, those that remember the predictive analytic research. If those students leave us, they're likely not to come back. And it's really important that we figure out a way to keep them engaged. I know we didn't get to everybody's questions, but APLU is going to actually look through the chat, look at your questions. We're going to look at the questions that came in through registration, and we're going to pull together some responses to those questions. We're also going to put up all the websites and the handbook that Jim gave us. Before I completely let you go, I just wanted to see, I know Julia's on as well with us. I wanted to see if Jim or Hay had any last minute things they would like to say to the group, and I should also say thank you to the participants too. But go ahead, Jim or Hay, did you have anything you wanted to say?
Sure, this is Hay. So it is, while this is, as I said, extraordinary times, we have a phenomenal community, I think, that we learn from each other, not just within our states, but across our states. And so I truly could not have, and we truly could not have gotten to where we are without the support and the help that I've gotten from colleagues across the US. Their ideas, their suggestions, and just their being there to support us as we support each other through the process.
Jim?
Wash your hands, scatter crowd. This too shall pass. Continue the great work that you're all doing, and help each other out.
All right, Julia, back to you.
Great, thank you so much. I really want to thank our two panelists and you, Karen, as well. I know you're all tremendously busy at this time, so I really appreciate you taking the time to share your knowledge and your wisdom with our audience, and thanks to everyone who tuned in today. We got a question about the resources, so here they are on the screen. I recognize those are URLs, so we will send this slide deck out along with the recording of the webinar, and as Karen mentioned, some of the frequently asked questions. I also want to share our contact information here at APLU, as well as the contact information of our panelists, if anyone wants to get in touch with further questions. Again, thank you so much, all of you, for joining us today, and good luck with your virtual course transitions.
Thank you, everybody. Bye,
Thank
Hay.
you.
Bye, Jim.
Thank you. Bye-bye now.
Bye.